Two paramedics rushed inside, pushing a stretcher where Martha Devlin, 56 years old, lay half-conscious, her breathing fast and shallow. Her right shoulder was swollen into a horrifying round mass, dark, stretched, and pulsing beneath the skin like something alive was trapped inside. "Room 3 now," a nurse shouted. The swelling suddenly jerked, making Martha scream in a raw, broken voice. It's tearing inside me," she cried, clutching the edges of the stretcher as the lump throbbed violently. Monitors shrieked. Vitals spiked. A trail of dark fluid dripped down her arm. The on-call surgeon ran beside the stretcher, eyes wide. "Move. Her shoulder's about to rupture. Everyone get ready." Dr. Elias Warren, 49, slammed his palm against the wall-mounted emergency button as nurses surrounded Martha's stretcher. He took one look at her shoulder, bloated, purple, and stretching her skin so thin it looked ready to split, and his face blanched. "This is critical," he warned, voice sharp. "If we don't relieve the pressure immediately, the infection could burst into her bloodstream." Martha whimpered, gripping his wrist with trembling fingers. Am I dying?" Dr. Warren leaned closer, urgency tightening his jaw. "If this ruptures inside your arm, you could lose the shoulder, the entire arm, or your life." His words froze the entire room. Prep for emergency imaging now. Only hours earlier, Martha Devlin's life had seemed painfully ordinary. The sun had barely risen over her small hillside home as she shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her stiff shoulders from another long night of poor sleep. At 56, every joint reminded her she wasn't young anymore. She brewed her morning tea, humming softly, the house quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. She paused, leaning against the counter. A dull ache throbbed beneath her right shoulder blade, annoying, nothing more. "Probably slept wrong again," she muttered, rolling her shoulder. She didn't know it yet, but the tiny discomfort she shrugged off that morning would soon spiral into a nightmare no one could have predicted. Later that afternoon, while changing her blouse before heading to the local craft group she attended every Thursday, Martha caught a glimpse of something small in the mirror. Right on the upper curve of her shoulder sat a tiny blackhead, no bigger than a sesame seed. Just a small dark dot, surrounded by normal skin. Nothing swollen. Nothing painful. Nothing alarming. She frowned at it, leaning closer. When did that show up? She pressed it lightly. No pain. No tenderness. Just a stubborn little spot. Most people would have ignored it completely. And Martha almost did too. She dabbed a bit of lotion over it, shrugged, and slipped into her cardigan. A tiny blemish on a woman in her 50s. Harmless. Ordinary. Or at least, that's what she believed. That insignificant little dot would soon unleash the most catastrophic infection of her life. That evening, after dinner, Martha sat in her armchair watching a rerun of her favorite old mystery show. As she adjusted her shawl, the tiny blackhead rubbed against the fabric, creating a faint itch. She sighed, annoyed, and lifted her hand. "Let me just get rid of this stupid thing." With her reading glasses perched crookedly on her nose, she pinched the blackhead between her nails, dry, unwashed, and still stained with the garlic she had chopped earlier. She squeezed once. Nothing. She squeezed harder. A sharp sting shot through her shoulder. "Ow, fine, whatever," she muttered, irritated. But she didn't stop. She dug her nail in, scratched at the surface, and forced another squeeze, this time breaking the skin. A tiny bead of blood appeared, along with a faint, milky discharge. She wiped it with the corner of her sleeve and didn't think twice. That was the moment everything went wrong. By the next morning, something felt off. Martha woke to a heavy, throbbing ache deep in her shoulder muscle, far worse than the tiny pinch she'd felt the night before. When she touched the spot, the skin felt noticeably warm, almost feverish. A faint redness radiated outward in a small circle, no bigger than a coin. "Great," she sighed, rubbing it gently. "Just what I needed." Throughout the day, the discomfort kept pulling at her attention. A sharp twinge every time she reached up. A burning sensation when she carried her grocery bag. An odd, dull pressure beneath the skin, like something was swelling from inside. Still, she convinced herself it was nothing. Just irritation. Just age. Just another little annoyance. She didn't realize these early signs were the infection's first quiet steps, long before it decided to attack with full force. For the next 2 days, the discomfort grew, but Martha pretended not to notice. Her daughter, Elena, stopped by on Sunday morning and immediately frowned when she saw her mother wince while lifting the kettle. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Martha insisted with a tight smile. "Just a stiff shoulder." Happens at my age. But the truth was harder to ignore. The redness had spread. The skin felt stretched, almost tight. A faint pulsing sensation throbbed beneath her cardigan like a tiny heartbeat that didn't belong to her. She told herself she didn't have time for doctors, not with the community bake sale coming up. She told herself it would settle down with ice and rest. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Still, she pushed the fear aside, burying it under chores, errands, and excuses. Denial felt easier for now. By midweek, the change was impossible to ignore. The small, coin-sized redness had exploded into a swollen lump the size of a golf ball. The skin over it had stretched shiny and tight, tinted a dark, angry red that deepened with every passing hour. When Martha tried lifting her arm to brush her hair, she gasped. A sharp, stabbing pain shot through her shoulder, dropping her brush to the floor. What on earth? She pulled her shirt collar aside and stared at the swelling in the mirror. It was bigger, rounder, hotter, and worse, the center of the lump looked darker, almost bruised. By evening, the lump had grown to the size of a tennis ball, pushing outward like something underneath was trying to escape. Her arm felt heavy, feverish. A low-grade fever crept in, making her dizzy as she moved around the house. Still, Martha whispered to herself, "It's just a bad infection, nothing serious, it'll calm down." But her reflection told a very different story. The next morning, determined not to make a fuss, Martha forced herself to attend her weekly craft group at the local community center. She tried to hide the swelling beneath a thick shawl, but the pain made every movement stiff and awkward. When she reached for a spool of yarn, the fabric slipped, revealing the bulging, reddened mass on her shoulder. A woman across the table gasped. "Good heavens, Martha, what happened to you?" Another leaned in, eyes widening with fear. "That doesn't look normal. It looks infected." Martha's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "It's fine, really." But people kept staring, whispering, exchanging uneasy glances. One woman nudged her gently. "You need a doctor. Today. Before that thing bursts." The room's concern pressed on her harder than the swelling itself. For the first time, Martha felt truly afraid. By evening, her daughter Elena arrived unannounced, holding a bag of groceries. The moment she stepped inside, she froze. Martha was sitting on the couch, breathing shallowly, her shawl slipping off her shoulder. "Mom, what is that?" Elena whispered, eyes widening in horror. Martha tried to pull the fabric back up, but the movement made her wince. The swelling had grown again, round, tense, and now the size of a softball, the skin stretched so tightly it looked ready to tear. "Nothing," Martha muttered. "Just a little infection." "A little infection?" Elena snapped, dropping the grocery bag. "Your shoulder looks like it's going to explode. Why didn't you tell me?" Martha looked away, ashamed. "I didn't want to worry you." Elena knelt beside her, voice trembling. "Mom, this is serious. We're going to the hospital. Now. Before something terrible happens." For once, Martha didn't argue. They should have left immediately. But Martha hesitated. As Elena grabbed her car keys, Martha clutched her daughter's arm, shaking her head weakly. "Just give me one night," she whispered. "Maybe the swelling will go down. I don't want to sit in an ER for hours." "Mom, no," Elena began, but Martha lifted her uninjured hand. "I promise, if it's not better by morning, I'll go." Her voice was strained, but determined, the same stubborn tone Elena had grown up with. Against her better judgment, Elena exhaled shakily and agreed. That night became the deadliest mistake. While Martha tried to sleep, a deep, burning pressure built inside her shoulder. The infection multiplied rapidly, feeding on the torn tissue she had caused with her nails. By dawn, everything had changed. And not for the better. Morning light crept through the curtains, but Martha didn't feel it. She woke with a violent shiver, her entire body trembling uncontrollably. Sweat soaked her nightshirt, and her breath came in uneven, ragged bursts. The swelling on her shoulder had doubled overnight. It was no longer just a lump. It was a massive, distorted bulge, stretching her skin into a thin, shiny dome. The center had darkened into a sickly purple, and faint streaks of yellow-green fluid oozed from the cracked edges. When she tried to sit up, a bolt of pain stabbed through her arm so fiercely she screamed. "Mom!" Elena rushed into the room, freezing at the sight. Martha's arm hung uselessly at her side, swollen from shoulder to elbow. The skin around the lump pulsed, literally moving, like pockets of pressure were shifting inside. "Hey Martha, you're burning up," Elena whispered, touching her forehead. Her mother's eyes were glassy, unfocused. Her lips were pale. Her breathing was too fast. Something was deeply, terrifyingly wrong. "Get help," Martha gasped. This was no longer an infection. This was an emergency spiraling out of control. Elena didn't waste another second. She practically carried her mother to the car and sped toward the urgent care clinic just 5 minutes away. As soon as they stumbled inside, the front desk nurse took one look at Martha's shoulder and went pale. "Oh my God, hold on," she muttered, immediately waving over the clinic's supervising physician, Dr. Carla Red, 54. Dr. Red hurried over, lifted the edge of Martha's sleeve, and stiffened. "That's not a routine infection," she said sharply. "This is necrotizing progression. She needs an ER, now. You can't drive her yourself." She signaled for emergency transport. "Call an ambulance. She's at risk of systemic collapse." The room erupted into action. The ambulance rushed Martha across town, but even sirens couldn't clear the congested morning traffic. Cars crawled bumper to bumper, horns blaring. Every minute felt like a countdown. Inside the vehicle, Martha's condition worsened. Her pulse raced. Her breathing hitched. The swelling throbbed so violently that the paramedic tightened his grip on the stretcher rails. "Stay with me, Martha," he urged. "We're almost there." But almost wasn't soon enough. When they finally arrived at the ER, the waiting room was overflowing. Stretchers lined the hallway, nurses scrambling, doctors overloaded. "We're full," a triage nurse warned. "She'll have to wait a few minutes." "A few minutes?" Elena shouted. "Look at her shoulder." The nurse's eyes widened. One look, 1 second, changed everything. "Clear trauma bay 2. Right now." For Martha, every delay pushed her closer to disaster. By the time Martha was wheeled into trauma bay 2, the infection had already begun its silent invasion. Nurse Haley Trent, 32, lifted Martha's arm gently and froze. Faint red streaks snaked down from the swollen shoulder, trailing across her upper arm like thin, angry lightning bolts. "Doctor, she's showing lymphatic spread," Haley whispered. Dr. Warren rushed in, jaw tightening as he examined the streaks. "Those lines mean the bacteria are moving into the bloodstream," he said grimly. "She's entering early sepsis." Martha blinked slowly, her eyelids heavy. Her skin was cold and clammy, despite the fever burning through her body. Elena clutched her hand. "Mom, stay awake. Please." The monitors beeped faster, too fast. Her blood pressure dropped. Her pulse turned frantic. Inside her shoulder, the swollen mass pulsed again, harder, angrier. The infection wasn't just spreading. It was taking control. The room erupted into chaos the moment Martha's vitals dipped again. "Blood pressure is crashing," a nurse shouted. Dr. Warren snapped into command mode. "We're moving her to emergency imaging now. If that abscess ruptures internally, she won't make it." Orderlies unlocked the brakes and rushed her stretcher down the hallway. Elena jogged beside them, tears streaming, gripping the rail as if her mother might disappear if she let go. Martha groaned, clutching her swollen shoulder with her trembling fingers. The skin bulged grotesquely, dark, stretched, and pulsing like a heartbeat that didn't belong to her. Every throb sent a fresh wave of pain tearing through her chest. "Please," Martha whispered, barely conscious. "Don't let me die." The automatic doors to imaging slid open, flooding her with cold fluorescent light. The truth about what was inside her shoulder was seconds away. Technicians swarmed around Martha as her stretcher slid beneath the ultrasound arm. Dr. Warren stood at her side, eyes locked on the monitor as the probe pressed gently against the swollen dome of her shoulder. The screen flickered, then revealed something that made the entire room fall silent. A massive fluid pocket, nearly the size of a grapefruit, sat buried deep under the skin. But it wasn't just fluid. Inside the cavity, dark shadowy clusters floated, dense patches of decaying tissue, drifting like debris in a storm. What is that?" Elena whispered. Dr. Warren swallowed hard. "The infection isn't just on the surface," he said. "It's eating through her muscle." He adjusted the probe, and the image shifted again. A jagged tear appeared in the muscle layer. Behind it, pockets of trapped air shimmered like bubbles. "That's gas-producing bacteria," he muttered. "If this bursts, it will release toxins directly into her bloodstream." The room's temperature seemed to drop. This was no routine abscess. It was a ticking bomb. Dr. Warren stepped away from the monitor, his expression tightening into something Elena had never seen before, fear. He took a slow breath, then looked between mother and daughter. "Martha," he said quietly, "the infection has destroyed a significant portion of your deltoid muscle. The bacteria are producing gas, and if that cavity ruptures, the toxins will hit your bloodstream instantly." Martha blinked, dazed. What does that mean? It means, he continued, voice heavy, you are minutes away from full septic shock. Elena's hand shot to her mouth. Dr. Warren didn't soften the truth. If we don't operate immediately right now, you could lose your entire arm, or your life. The words landed like a hammer. Martha's eyes widened, breath trembling. Operate? She whispered. Right now. He nodded once, firmly. We're preparing the ore. This is your only chance. The weight of those words crushed the room into silence. They wheeled Martha toward the operating room, the hallway lights blurring above her like streaks of cold white fire. Her breath trembled with each inhale, her fevered skin shining with a thin sheen of sweat. Elena walked beside the stretcher, holding her mother's hand tight enough to leave marks. Mom, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered, voice cracking. Martha gave a weak smile, though her eyes glistened. I'm sorry, she murmured. I should have gone sooner. I should have listened. Elena shook her head, wiping her tears. Stop. You don't apologize for being scared. A soft beeping echoed from the monitors. Dr. Warren approached with the anesthesiologist. We're going to take good care of you, he said gently. But we have to move quickly. Martha swallowed hard, staring at her swollen shoulder, distorted, dark, and throbbing beneath the surgical blankets. Well, will I wake up? She whispered. Elena squeezed her hand tighter. You will, she said through tears. You have to. As the doors opened, Martha felt herself drifting, her daughter's hand slipping from her fingertips. The operating room hummed with urgent energy as Martha was transferred onto the surgical table. Bright overhead lights ignited the space, casting her swollen shoulder in a harsh, unforgiving glare. Dr. Warren and his team moved fast, gloves snapping, instruments clinking, monitors beeping in rapid rhythm. Anesthesia ready, the anesthesiologist called. Begin, Dr. Warren responded. As Martha drifted fully unconscious, the team positioned themselves, eyes fixed on the grotesque mound that had overtaken her shoulder. The skin bulged upward like a pressurized balloon, stretched thin to near transparency. Scalpel in hand, Dr. Warren made the first incision. The room jolted. A violent burst of pressurized pus erupted upward, splattering across the surgical drape. Thick, yellow-green fluid poured out in heavy waves, mixed with streaks of dark, rotting tissue. Section suction now, a nurse shouted. The suction device whirred to life, pulling away the flood of contaminated fluid. But the horror wasn't over. As the incision widened, necrotic muscle fibers came into view, dark, dead patches of flesh dangling loosely, eaten away as if something had chewed through them. My God, one resident whispered. She's lost nearly half the deltoid. Dr. Warren worked quickly, slicing away every rotten section, scooping out pockets of blackened decay, draining hidden chambers of trapped gas. Each cut revealed deeper damage. Tunnels of infection burrowed through healthy tissue. We need to open it further, he said grimly. I'm not leaving any of this inside her. The surgery had become a battle, and Martha's shoulder was the battleground. When the final pockets of infection were drained and the last fragments of dead muscle were removed, the surgical team stepped back for a moment, silent, shaken. Where Martha's shoulder muscle should have been, there was now a deep, open cavity. A hollow crater, raw and exposed, nearly the size of a small bowl. The edges of the wound were jagged, the remaining muscle fibers pulled tight like frayed ropes. The healthy tissue that remained looked pale and exhausted, fighting to stay alive. Tubes were inserted into the cavity, each one snaking outward to help drain the lingering infection. Nurse Haley packed the cavity with sterile gauze, layer after careful layer, watching as the material disappeared deep inside the gaping void. Elena stood outside the viewing window, hands trembling, eyes filled with grief as she caught a glimpse of the wound. Nothing could have prepared her for the reality. Her mother's shoulder wasn't just damaged. It had been devastated. Martha woke hours later in a recovery room, the ceiling spinning above her. Her shoulder felt like someone had carved fire into her skin. Even the air moving across it burned. A nurse gently peeled back the bandage. Easy, Martha, this will hurt. Hurt was an understatement. When the gauze inside the cavity was removed for the first time, Martha screamed, raw, involuntary, echoing down the hallway. Elena rushed in, tears filling her eyes as she watched her mother grip the rails of the bed until her knuckles turned white. Every day brought another dressing change. Every day another layer of gauze pulled from the deep wound. Every day another wave of agony. Sometimes Martha cried silently. Sometimes she begged for it to stop. Sometimes she simply stared at the wall, exhausted beyond words. Healing wasn't gentle. It was brutal. Slow, punishing, and far from over. Martha had always prided herself on being independent, strong, capable. But weeks into recovery, she could barely lift a cup of tea. Her right arm hung weak and thin, the muscles wasted. Her friends from the craft group sent messages at first, but over time, the visits slowed. Invitations stopped. Life outside the hospital moved on without her. The hardest blow came from her longtime friend, Nora, who muttered during a rare visit, "You scared everyone. People don't know what to say. They don't handle sickness well." Martha nodded, but inside something shattered. Not everyone stays when life gets ugly. Pain isolates. Fear drives people away. Only Elena remained steadfast, but even she looked exhausted. The surgeon's words were blunt the following week. "You won't regain full strength in that arm," Dr. Warren said. "Some functions will return, but your shoulder will never be the same." For Martha, the reality hit harder than the infection itself. She loved volunteering at the community center. She loved cooking, gardening, knitting, all simple joys that required the very arm she could no longer rely on. She stared at her weakened limb, trembling from the effort of merely lifting it. "I feel useless," she whispered. Her dreams weren't grand, but they were hers. And now many of them were gone, replaced by limitations, restrictions, and a wound that changed everything. 2 months later, the annual community bake sale approached, the one event Martha never missed in 15 years. She had always brought her famous peach cobbler, earning smiles from half the town. That year, she couldn't even lift a pan. Elena tried to help, offering to bake it for her, but Martha shook her head gently. "It won't be mine," she said. On the day of the event, she watched from her window as cars lined the street and children ran laughing toward the community hall. She wasn't there. Her chair remained empty. Her cobbler table stood bare. It felt like a piece of her identity had been erased. A symbolic loss far deeper than anyone understood. Just when things seemed stable, the doctors discovered lingering infection in the deeper tissue. "We need to take you back in," Dr. Warren said regretfully. Another surgery, then a third. Each time, they scraped away more damaged tissue, cleaned out new pockets of bacteria, and reopened the wound to remove debris the body couldn't fight off. The routine became familiar. Pre-op fasting, the cold or lights, waking to pain, tubes, and bandages. Elena tried to stay strong, but every trip to the operating room drained her too. After the third surgery, the cavity was finally clean, but now Martha's shoulder was severely misshapen, sunken inward where muscle used to be. She'd survived the infection, but her body had paid the price. 3 months later, the wound had finally closed, leaving behind a scar unlike anything Martha had ever imagined. The crater stretched across her shoulder like a collapsed valley, the skin puckered and uneven. Parts of it were glossy and tight, other parts dipped inward where muscle no longer existed. When she looked in the mirror for the first time, her breath caught. "That's me," she whispered. Elena wrapped an arm around her, but Martha barely felt it. Her reflection wasn't just a scar. It was a reminder of the infection that had consumed her life, of every scream, every surgery, every moment she had been helpless. She slowly traced the edge of the scar with trembling fingers. It wasn't just a wound. It was a permanent map of everything she had survived, and everything she had lost. Physical therapy helped, but progress was painfully slow. Martha could lift her arm only halfway before the weakness stopped her. Simple tasks, buttoning a shirt, reaching a shelf, brushing her hair, became battles she rarely won alone. "This is your new normal," the therapist said gently. "We'll push for improvement, but some limitations will stay." Martha nodded, trying to accept it. But acceptance didn't come easy. She was once strong, capable, proud. Now she planned her days around what she couldn't do. Sometimes she cried quietly at night, mourning the version of herself that would never return. Other times she sat silently, hands folded in her lap, trying to make peace with a body forever changed. Healing wasn't just physical. It was emotional, mental, spiritual. And the hardest part was accepting that this wasn't temporary. It was permanent. When Martha finally regained enough strength, she did something unexpected. She asked to speak at the community center. Standing at the front of a small crowd, her arm supported by a sling, she slowly lifted her sleeve, revealing the cratered scar running across her shoulder. Gasps echoed through the room. "This," she began softly, "started as a tiny blackhead. A speck. Something I thought was nothing." She told them about the squeezing, the delay, the denial, the pain. She told them how close she'd come to losing her arm, or her life. If something seems wrong, don't ignore it, she said, voice trembling. Don't be embarrassed. Don't wait like I did. Her story silenced the room. Some faces were pale. Some were tearful. All were listening. Later that night, Martha sat beside her bedroom window, tracing the edge of her scar under the soft glow of a lamp. This all began with one tiny blackhead, she whispered. And it cost me half my shoulder, months of my life, and the strength I'll never get back. But she breathed deeply, letting a quiet strength settle inside her. I survived, she reminded herself. And maybe someone else will avoid this because of me.